by my colleague Thules Simelane, who is in KwaNongoma. Thules, so we know that overnight, and it is a secret ritual, it is a very private ritual, and it is a ritual attended only by men. We don't know a lot about what's going to happen, but we know that the king will be interred overnight. When are we likely to hear from the royal family? When are we likely to hear announcements of his successor? And what is due to happen thereafter?
So, Sally, you're absolutely right. The stage where we are at the moment is shrouded in mystery and mysticism. It's age-old traditions that the AmaZulu would have carried out, as you know, that His Majesty King Goodwill Zwelithini kabehekezulu was the 8th king of the AmaZulu as a completely a nation that has been brought together from various groupings some 200 odd years ago. So he was the 8th king, and these are traditions that have developed over a period of time. They are mystical, they are shrouded in mystery, but also quite sacred to the AmaZulu. So in terms of that level of detail, we really cannot tell you what's happening a good distance from where we are behind us there at the KwaKhetho Mthandayo Palace. We are standing some good, 1 kilometer away from there because of the request that was made that we give the royal family that space to be able to carry out this part of the processes for the interment of His Majesty King Goodwill Zwelithini kabehekezulu. You ask whether we will be hearing from the royal family. Well, there was that offer by the Prime Minister of the AmaZulu monarchy, Inkosi Mangosuthu Buthelezi, that he would want to communicate as much as possible so that there's no confusion in terms of what is happening. But I doubt if there'll be any further communication coming through tonight, perhaps sometime tomorrow, and by that time our understanding is that His Majesty will have been interred somewhere in the middle of the night, and during the evening, in the early hours, is what we are told by the royal sources. So what you will see, though, Sally, is a continuous stream of people coming from all parts of KwaZulu-Natal who are coming to pay homage to His Majesty. And these are people that, have organized transportation for themselves, many of them in the various regiments of young men, much more mature men who would have fallen into different regiments in terms of the arrangement of AmaZulu as a nation and as a people. But also you're seeing maidens, and I think in the distant background I could hear maidens sort of in song and singing amahubo somewhere in the distant background, as well as mature ladies, some of them women who would be of marriage age, who are married and heads and sort of mothers of households, also coming through in their regiments, many of them really clad in traditional attire. So that's what will be happening throughout the night, Sally, building into tomorrow morning when we get into the stately function which has been arranged by the state.
And of course, it is an official funeral, category 1, we understand, but it is being slightly altered because of COVID-19 regulations. So how many people will be physically attending, and do we know who will be there?
That's an impossible question to answer, Sally, because it would seem to me that no one really knows how many people will show up. In terms of the official program, I think government can pretty much control that part in terms of who has access to the marquee, the various areas and spaces that have been arranged where we understand President Cyril Ramaphosa will deliver the eulogy and basically lead from the government side of things. The Premier of KwaZulu-Natal, Sihle Zikalala, will also be among those that will be making a contribution. And I think at some point they were indicating that we will hear from perhaps a representative or two from the royal family. But that's what they can control in terms of the marquee. What they can't control are these people that, have decided of their own initiative that they will come through. There have been various arrangements that have been made, including setting up big screens in KwaNongoma to say to people, listen, you don't have to necessarily be in the vicinity of Kwakhetho Mthandayo Palace. You can actually view the proceedings, which will be streamed through arrangement by GCIS and the SABC. You can view that somewhere within KwaNongoma to try and break up a situation where this turns into a super spreader event. Minister Zwelithini, Minister of Health, has been here at Kwakhetho Mthandayo for a good part of the day today, driving that message home to say we may be in mourning and wanting to express our sympathies and how we feel as a people, but we still are in the midst of this pandemic. Sally, let me bring in an element that has to do with the spread and the sprawl of the AmaZulu and that lineage that comes from AmaZulu. I'm joined by Induna Tulani Jubane from KwaMthwakazi, from across the Limpopo in Zimbabwe. And this really, Sally, underscores the interlinkages that have built up over a period of time. Thank you so much for talking to me, Baba. Just give me a sense of why you are here and how you fit in into these linkages that I'm talking about in the history of AmaZulu.
We as the Mthwakazi nation, we come a long way with the relationship. Yeah, we as the Mthwakazi nation, we come a long way with this Zulu nation according to our relations. You know, our King Zwelithini, they were once working hand in hand with His Majesty, King Shaka Zulu. So now silapha nje nathi sizobhodla emswaneni njengabantwana beSilo. Sizothi nathi awehlanga lungehlanga.
Yeah. Akuchaze nje kafuphi nduna ukuthi ukuba khona kwenu la kuchaza ukuthini mayelana neimpande nokusabalala kwabantu ongathi mawubheka umlando wabo ulandele uze ufike kwaZulu original.
Lento ichaza khona ukuthi thina nesizwe sakwaZulu siyinto yinye. Ingakho size lapha nathi ukuthi sizobhodla emswaneni. Kusho khona ukuthi siyayihlonipha inkosi yethu. Ngoba samandebele kaMzilikazi nesizwe sakwaZulu siyinto yinye. Ingakho sisuke sa dabula amazwe siza la nathi sizobabaza nabanye. Kuyinto enkulu kakhulu kithi sisizwe samahlabezulu ngoba thina sizizwa sikhathazeka kakhulu emoyeni, silahlekelwa kakhulu ngoba inkosi yamaZulu iyinkosi yethu nathi. Sizizwa silahlekelwe kakhulu.
Yeah. All right. Ngibonga kakhulu Baba Tulani Jubane, who is from the iSizwe sikaMthwakazi Sally. So there, just a sense and a sampling of the history and the various lines of lineage. He alludes to the lineage that goes all the way to Mzilikazi kaMashobane and that history with Ushaka kaSenza ngakhona. All those many years ago, some good 200 years ago, which has led to a situation where, Sally, I mean, when I was based in Zimbabwe, I was always struck by the similarities between isiNdebele spoken in Zimbabwe and isiZulu. And I used to, say to myself that this is closer to isiZulu, the language that they speak there, than it is to isiNdebele that is spoken on the side of South Africa.
And Tulas, it is a lineage that will continue. And of course, obviously, once the king is interred, the next focus has to be who will continue this remarkable lineage. Is it clear how long we will wait until we hear who will be the next king?
Well, yeah, at this particular point, to be quite honest with you, Sally, I don't know the answer to that question. In terms of processes, you would need to be speaking to people who are well-versed in issues of how that matter is handled by AmaZulu in their own cultural sensitivities and how that happens. But I can tell you now that there are established practices. You will know that King Goodwill Zwelithini kabehekezulu ascends to the throne quite honestly in 1968. I know that the actual history records 1971, but that's actually the point at which the coronation, the public outward expression of it actually happens. But, his father, the previous king, Solomon, having passed on in 1968, that made King Goodwill Zwelithini to become king at that particular point. There are those sensitivities in terms of the transition, but it's really about keeping the lineage alive, and there are many, many factors to consider that have to do with, for instance, the first wife and how the first wife of the king having had ilobolo paid for her by the nation, but then you bring in other considerations into that equation that have to do with, in the present circumstances where the king's first son, the oldest son, passed on a few months ago. It really opens it up wide. You have to ask questions, for instance, as to royal lineage. Absolutely. To what extent does that weigh in terms of who becomes the next king? So we really are far from finding out, and I would rather not hazard a guess in as far as that is concerned, Sally.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do know that we will have to wait a while. And of course, it was absolutely tragic in November last year, the murder of Prince Lethu Zulu here in Johannesburg. So there are some very big decisions that I'm sure have had to be made because it is a crucially important role, and it will continue a remarkable monarchy. Thank you very much, Zwelithini Similani, coming to us live from KwaNongoma. Still ahead on